Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, August the 19th, 2025. Today there is a square between the Moon and Mars. There are other things going on, but I thought in this video it might be a good idea to focus on the Moon square Mars in some detail and look at some examples that indicate what we might expect with this aspect. So that's the main theme of this video. But before I look at Moon square Mars in detail, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, Tuesday, August the 19th, 2025. Top right, that is a picture of Mars. That sort of demonstrates that I am going to be looking at Mars in detail, or more specifically, I'm going to be looking at a square between the Moon and Mars, and that's my theme for today. And so, as far as what's happening today, Tuesday, this is a chart set for New York at noon, and the Moon is in Cancer. We've got quite a lot of planets in Cancer. We've got the Moon in Cancer, we've got Jupiter in Cancer, and we have got Venus in Cancer. And my sort of headline aspect is the square between the Moon and Mars. And so this Moon-Mars square can be a problem aspect. It's quite dynamic, and if there's something bothering us, we might want to be open and honest about it, especially as Mercury is still making a sextile to Mars. Now that Mercury sextile Mars is starting to move out of orb, but Mars is a planet that might be today quite important, and so I'm not expecting everything to go entirely smoothly. Having said that, the Moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Moon conjunct Jupiter, it's a great aspect, and it's in Cancer. So the Moon is in its own sign in Cancer, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, and you've also got the influence of Venus. So tomorrow we've got Moon conjunct Jupiter. Yeah, so that's Wednesday. Wednesday we've got Moon conjunct Venus. We're going to have Moon moving on to the Venus-Jupiter midpoint. So in many respects, it should be a pretty good day. It's maybe a day when many of us are going to be quite fortunate, and if we work hard at something, there's a good chance that it does work out, and there may be sort of a general sense of optimism that things really are moving. So overall, that's the day. I don't think that it's necessarily going to be an earth-shattering day, simply because there aren't the aspects to support that. We've just got these two lunar aspects. Well, you've got a semi-square between the Moon and the Sun. So there's a Moon, there is a Sun. So what's the significance of a semi-square? Well, the semi-square is just telling us something about the lunar cycle. The lunar cycle is coming to an end. We've got a new moon coming up. I think that's over the weekend, and so it's nearly over, this lunar cycle. And additionally, the Sun is nearly out of Leo. Just got 3 days left. So with the semi-square, you could say that it's the final crisis before the end of this cycle, and absolute last chance to do anything. And there might be a challenge here. Perhaps Sun in Leo is challenged by Moon in Cancer. So that might be a sort of a tension, between these two signs. Sun in Leo is about ourselves, and it's about our egos, perhaps, wanting to be in control and wanting to be positive and outward going and demanding respect and attention, then Moon in Cancer represents a different message. We have to not just think about how we appear, but we have to think about stuff which is, more personal, perhaps relating to our home and our family, and so that is one way of looking at it. But there is a positive side to this, because we have got the Sun in Leo and the Moon in Cancer, and so we've got the two lights, the Sun and the Moon, both in their own signs, and that might be quite fortunate. It adds to the good fortune of the day. And we should really focus on what is most fortunate, and it is that conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. So that's the picture for New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, the Moon is still in Cancer. So if you're in Australasia, there's not a great deal of difference between what you're experiencing and what's being experienced by people in the United States and the Americas, though the Moon square Mars is perhaps going to be the immediate aspect of relevance, because that's the first aspect that's going on. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, the Moon is in early Cancer, and it's making a square to Mars, and so it could be perhaps a more angry day than if you're in the Americas, but it's only a matter of degree. I don't want to say that there's a huge amount of difference between the two, and the Moon is still making a conjunction to Jupiter. And turning to the heliocentric view, here it is, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system, and Mercury is moving into Taurus, and so Mercury in Taurus is making an opposition to Mars, and it's making a square to Pluto. In fact, Mars and Pluto are in square, and this is kind of giving a different view to the geocentric picture. The geocentric picture seemed fairly straightforward. It didn't seem hugely dramatic, in spite of the fact that the Moon is square Mars. But heliocentrically, there is very much a T-square. Mars opposition Mercury and Pluto on the T. You can see it here. And as I say with heliocentric aspects, they tend to have a collective nature. It's about the anger in the world, and people are nervous. People have got stuff to say, and they want to be in control. They want power, and I'm sort of obviously reminded about this continuing tussle in the wake of the Putin-Trump meeting, and it seems that a lot of people, a lot of countries want to have their say, in particular the European countries. There's real anger in Europe about this meeting, and so all these European leaders have sort of gone off to Washington to sort of advocate for Zelensky's cause. Is it Zelensky's cause? Maybe it's their own cause. I mean, who knows? But that just shows that at a collective level, people want to be heard, and they want to be powerful in a situation where maybe they don't actually have a huge amount of power. But Mercury wants to be heard, and Mercury opposition Mars at a time when geocentrically we have Mercury sextile Mars. So we've got this aspect. It's only 1 degree out, the Mercury sextile Mars. We've also got Mercury opposition Mars. So, like yesterday, there is a lot to be said, and there's not always going to be a huge amount of agreement with Mercury opposition Mars. Different people with different views, and if they're not being taken seriously, they could get angry. And maybe it's not just at a collective level. It may filter down to the personal. So, you perhaps want to tell everyone what's on your mind. You want to be clear, and you don't want to be ignored. But there's no need to push the point too far. You can only say so much. So now I want to turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, August the 19th, 2025. Not everything is going to go your way, or at least that's how it might feel. There are people and situations that you have to deal with, and you don't necessarily want to deal with it. And additionally, Aries, you might be in a situation where it doesn't seem as if you have quite as much power as you would like to have. And so the question is, what do you do? When it seems that you can't have the full influence that you feel you deserve. And so Aries, there is a possibility that you're tempted to go over the top, to really assert yourself. You have to be heard. It doesn't matter what you do. You may even be tempted to move into areas where there's a danger of embarrassing yourself. I mean, these are possibilities. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think it would be rather unnecessary. And perhaps you just have to accept that you don't have quite as much control as you'd like, and you have to look at the ebb and flow. Sometimes you have huge amounts of power, and other times not so much power. And I would suggest that you at the very least let everyone have their say. You might assume a conflict where none exists, and you have to also recognize that there may be times during the day when you are on other people's territory, and when you're on other people's territory, you have to accept that. And so to an extent, you have to follow other people's rules and their codes of conduct. And it might be frustrating, but it's the right approach. And if you can be reasonable and not feel that you always have to be heard, then it shouldn't be so bad. And in fact, if you can just focus on what makes you feel comfortable, then you'll get what you're looking for. I mean, don't forget that the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Moon conjunct Jupiter is, it's a great aspect, and it's in Cancer. So it's in a sign that is, at the real bottom of your chart. It's foundational. And so if you stop worrying about power dynamics and instead think about what makes you feel happy and secure, then it should be a much easier day. And while you're at it, Aries, perhaps you shouldn't be worrying so much about what other people are doing, what other people are not doing, and you need to look at the wider picture. Perhaps recognize that other people are influenced by something else, and that someone's behavior in one situation is related to another situation, and it's the same. Different people, different places, they're all being influenced by the same thing. And so, Aries, it would be a good idea if you would think about the collective, the political, the social, the worries that people have, and it's not always personal. And so perhaps you need to really think about, think about why people are behaving as they are, and realizing that some things are out of everyone's control, and so there's no point in placing blame when you're dealing with collective forces. I mean, you can blame the collective, you can blame nations, governments, but putting blame at an individual level, I don't think that there's much point in it. And although, Aries, you are or should be concerned with what's happening sort of economically and politically in whatever country you're living in, you at the same time do need to be thinking about, what is important to you. Sort out yourself and then worry about other people. And don't feel that you always have to be doing something. You always have to be free. It would be nice to be free, but today you're not quite as free as you'd like to be. And that's just the way it is. And things are going to change. And it's just with the moon in Cancer, you perhaps need to enjoy the moon being in Cancer. And the less you try to do, the less force you apply, then the easier it's going to be. And the moon, I've just said the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. It's also starting to make a conjunction to Venus. Tomorrow we have a conjunction to Venus. And so with 3 planets in Cancer, Aries, I think that your aim should be to give yourself peace of mind and not to feel that there's anything that you have to do, and you shouldn't be worried that you've got some ambition and for some reason you can't achieve this ambition. Well, short term maybe you can't, but we're just dealing with one day, and in the end things are going to improve. When I say in the end, I mean, is it really a bad day? I mean, it needn't be a bad day. This is a point I'm trying to make. It just depends what you choose to do with the day. If you are really trying to assert yourself and you really want to be taken seriously, then it might be a difficult day. If, on the other hand, you concentrate on just what's really important to you and giving yourself grounding, then today could be fine. In fact, today could be great. Taurus. A lot of planets in Cancer, and that includes Venus. Venus is still there in Cancer, still making a conjunction to Jupiter. That conjunction to Jupiter is 7 degrees apart, but now we have the moon coming in. So the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and the moon. Tomorrow the moon will be making the conjunction to Venus, so the moon will be bringing Venus and Jupiter together, and that's going to make you feel good about yourself, and you can be lucky, and whatever you're doing, you'll probably get it right, and you don't have to make a huge effort to get it right. Just be yourself and say whatever it is that's important to you. Communication does matter, but you don't have to be looking for any concrete results. It's just creating a situation where words can be exchanged, and you don't have to feel that you're tied to any one place. So a bit of moving around one place to another place, just maybe a couple of miles here, a couple of miles there. We're not talking about huge journeys. Just give yourself some variety. That would be very useful, and take advantage of any ability you have to communicate, however you want to communicate, because right now, you'll know what to say, and indeed you'll be able to speak with conviction. And conviction is important, isn't it? I mean, it seems to be a bit unfair that conviction is so important. We hear about in politics, we hear about conviction politicians, politicians who don't necessarily have good arguments, but they are just convinced that something is right. And at the moment, Taurus, you may be convinced about something, absolutely convinced that this is the way, that the other way is not the right way, that this is the way to go, and whatever it is. And Taurus, I think that you're going to be very good at arguing your case. People will listen to you, and you can be persuasive. And it's not that you have to think about necessarily winning an argument. It's just getting someone's attention and being able to speak about things which put another person at their ease. And because once someone is relaxed and they're feeling comfortable in your presence, well, that's probably all it takes. After that, there you will, by and large, do what they're told. And so, in your own way, Taurus, today you can be pretty persuasive, and you can be persuasive without much in the way of drama. It's just all very easy. Now, as far as relationships are concerned, particularly close relationships, it's a bit of a mixed picture. There's no doubt that you're able to present yourself very well, and you come over as someone who is reassuring, and people like you. But the moon is making a square to Mars, so moon square Mars, it's an important aspect. It's the headline aspect of the day. I'll be talking about moon square Mars in detail later in this video, but moon square Mars can indicate a clash or a situation where there's just a lack of ease between you and one other person. I think it's one other person. I think that overall your ability to get on with people is really very good at the moment. But moon square Mars, there just may be passing friction. Something someone says, something you say, you don't mean to say it, but it could give rise to offence. But it could work another way. It could be someone says something which appears to be innocuous, but you decide to overreact. So it's very important that you don't overreact, and that you are able to get a perspective. Again, I'm particularly talking about close relationships here. I'm not talking about the general way in which you get on with people, but just something minor happens which is of no consequence, should be of no consequence, but for some reason you take it too seriously. So that is possible with this moon square Mars, but it would be, I think, unnecessary. And just don't forget that there's a right way of saying something and a wrong way, and if you get it right, then everything's going to be fine. Gemini, you are in the mood for change. You don't want things to stay the same, and you believe that now might be a great time to break free. So what has been holding you back, or at least you perceive it as having been holding you back, and it may relate to what was going on while Mercury was retrograde. Okay, I know that Mercury is still Mercury is very much direct now. It's now moving faster than Mars, but still, you do believe that you could be freer, that there's something you're having to pay attention to, but you don't necessarily want to pay attention to. You don't want to pay attention to it at all, and you are, in the mood for expressing yourself and your needs, and you can see a chance here to overthrow things which have been unnecessarily holding you back. So now might be your time, but you've got to get it right. Just because you see an opportunity to break free doesn't necessarily mean you should take advantage of that opportunity, because you might just be causing an unnecessary drama, and maybe you don't have to make a big deal about it. Maybe you can express your freedom just by being yourself, and you don't have to have some huge sort of conflict about it. You might feel that your precious creativity is being undermined by someone else, or or perhaps you're worried that there's not enough money to do everything you want to do. But just a reminder, if something really is important, really is essential to who you are, then money is not an issue. Money is only important if it's an activity that is fairly peripheral, but you've just decided to take it seriously. You've decided that you want to do something. You're not quite sure why you want to do something, and so you look at what's holding you up, and you might then feel, it's all about spending money on something, or worrying about not being able to spend money on something. So do think, Gemini, about what freedom means, because we use this word freedom a lot, but sometimes we don't really think about it. But it's really about your fundamental powers, ability to express yourself, and to be able to do what you want. And so do think about that, and make sure that it really is a fundamental part of who you are, what your underlying destiny is. So there is an opportunity here to have a great day, but you've just got to be absolutely focused on who you are and what is important to you. Now, there are a lot of planets in Cancer. We've got 3 planets in Cancer, and I've just talked about money. And with the Moon making a square to Mars, which I kind of talked about, I've suggested that there might be some friction with money. But the Moon square Mars, that's just one aspect. The Moon goes on, it makes a conjunction to Jupiter, makes a conjunction to Venus. In fact, tomorrow, Wednesday, the Moon makes a conjunction to Venus. And the Moon conjunct Jupiter, it's a fortunate aspect, and it can be a lucky aspect. And so if you're looking for money, or you want to work with money, or you want to push your financial interests, whatever they might be, then Moon conjunct Jupiter could help you out in quite a major way. So financially, I think that it may actually be quite a good day when things really start to move for you. But you have to do it properly. And with Moon conjunct Jupiter, there's always a double side to that. Moon Jupiter as an aspect can be overindulgent, can take something too far, and once you get involved in something, you don't know when to stop. So if you are spending money, or in a situation where you feel that you have to spend money, do work out what your limits are, because Moon conjunct Jupiter sometimes just forgets where the limits are and just can sort of overstep the mark. So do be careful there. Now, one other thing, Gemini, is the heliocentric picture. So heliocentrically, Mercury is moving out of Aries and into Taurus. Remember, this is heliocentric, not geocentric. And there it makes an opposition to Mars, and it makes a square to Pluto. So there is a real part of this, because we've got a heliocentric T-square impacting Mercury. And you want to be free, and I think that's probably what it's all about. And I think that, I've just said that. And you should be able to find your freedom without getting involved in any form of conflict. Yet, heliocentrically, Mercury is opposition Mars. And so, Mercury opposition Mars and its square Pluto, you might find yourself taking something really seriously, and you feel you have to give it everything, and you also become quite defensive. There is that possibility. If you're criticized, or if you feel that something isn't going your way. So be very careful about that. It may be something you can ignore, because we're dealing with a heliocentric aspect, and the heliocentric aspects can be quite vague, and they can be sort of more about the collective and the social rather than you. But there may be just moments where you feel that you just have to do everything to claim your freedom, and you want to make a big drama about it, and the drama would be unnecessary, and it just might be more trouble than it's worth. So don't take everything seriously, and don't feel that you always have to make a big show, because I don't think you do. Cancer, there's no reason why it can't be a great day. I mean, we've got 3 planets in your sign. We have got Moon, Jupiter, Venus here, and so that looks pretty good. Your good luck could be sort of at a maximum. You've already had Venus conjunct Jupiter in Cancer. Okay, that was a long time ago. And Venus and Jupiter are over 7 degrees apart, but the Moon is now coming into Cancer and is putting everything together again. So with the Moon conjunct Jupiter, you are fortunate. You can present yourself extremely well, and so exactly what kind of image you want to present, and Cancer, people are going to like you. So it's possibly not a time for being reserved. Be yourself, and don't allow anyone to get in your way, or to hold you back. So where might the problems be? Well, the Moon is making a square to Mars, and I will be talking in detail about this square to Mars later in this video. But this Moon square Mars can be about you dealing with things which you really shouldn't be dealing with. You don't have to deal with it, but you just find that it's just difficult to avoid. And so I would have probably said that this Moon square Mars might say something about your home, or things that you know very well. And so Mars represents a pull. You could spend a lot of time thinking about where you live, your domestic arrangements, how you get on with your family. So that's all sort of Mars in Libra, and it could upset your equilibrium. And so Cancer, if you have got a choice, do you go for the higher or the lower? Do you go for what is high profile, or do you go for the basics of the matter, the foundations? It's always good to think about the foundations, but it can be too much of a good thing. And so if you spend too much time worrying about your home and your family, or your own sort of private memories and your boundaries, and if you start getting wrapped up in all of that, then that might be asking for trouble. And perhaps you should be more open-minded, and not get stuck in one place, or get sidetracked by perhaps people who know you so well that they know all your weaknesses. You don't want that, and you want to be able to keep moving. And in that way you can take advantage of the Moon conjunct Jupiter. Moon conjunct Jupiter is a terrific aspect, and you might say, well, Moon conjunct Jupiter happens every month, but this conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter is tied in with Venus. So the next time the Moon makes a conjunction to Jupiter in a month's time, Venus won't be in Cancer anymore. It will be somewhere else. And so if you want to take advantage of this conjunction between Moon, Jupiter and Venus, well, you've got to make the most of it. And that means you've got today, tomorrow, while the Moon is still in Cancer, but after that, well, things change. So you've got to be, as far as possible, quite sort of outward going and positive, and you've got to you really think that, of all the different things that could happen, the best is going to occur. And if you can present yourself as being someone who is positive and enthusiastic, who focuses on the good things rather than the bad, then I think that is the right approach. And with that kind of attitude, you can create an amazing atmosphere. So overall, Cancer, it looks like being a good day, provided you're not dragged down maybe by your own negativity, passing negativity, or perhaps dragged down by just over concern with what's happening at home, or with what your family are trying to get you involved with. Yeah, sure, you can have great relations with your family, but your family can sometimes just be too demanding, and in certain situations that could spoil the day, and in fact it could spoil the day's luck. Leo, you at the moment might be reserved just a bit. It's something that you want to hold back. You can't be everywhere, and this reserve is primarily emotional. You don't want to give everything away, and it's not the kind of day where you want to sort of emote about your own private feelings and your concerns, and that wouldn't work. And this is going to spill over into relationships as well. I think I mentioned this yesterday, and so today, like yesterday, it might be difficult to get really close to another person, to sort of let go and just work on a purely sort of emotional level. I think that's going to be difficult. So Leo, do respect the fact that you have some reserve, and so you can by all means be sociable, you can be with people, you can enjoy their company, you can enjoy the fact that the sun is still in a wonderful position in Leo. You can do all of that, but you just don't have to give too much away. And you perhaps have to think about where conversations are leading, and if conversations become overly emotional, going into areas that you feel uncomfortable with, then you can close the conversation. That's one possibility. Or you can steer the conversation onto safer ground. So it's as simple as that, and that shouldn't take away from the fact that that today does look pretty good. We've still got Mercury square Mars, Mercury in Leo. Remember, Mercury is still in Leo, and it's sextile Mars. So in terms of most subjects, you can be very clear, and you can be dynamic, and people are going to listen to you. And don't forget also that the sun is coming to the end of Leo. So the sun at 26, 27 Leo, there's only 3 days left before the sun goes into Virgo. And at the moment, the sun is in Leo and the moon is in Cancer. And so the sun and the moon are both in their own signs. And we're not going to get a situation like this for another year. And so I think just a simple fact that the sun and the moon are both in their own signs is very fortunate. I think it's fortunate for all of us, but I think it's fortunate for you as well. And so Leo, it's perhaps a time to be aware of what is important to you, and also to accept that you might be able to communicate very well, but there are going to be moments today, not just moments, probably hours today, when you would be better off on your own, not feeling pressured. There's no need to feel pressured. And it just could be, Leo, that your own sort of private pursuits work very well for you. And this Moon Jupiter conjunction, which I've been talking about for quite a lot, so Moon Jupiter conjunction, it's a very fortunate aspect. But the question you have to ask yourself, Leo, is where is the good fortune? Where can you find it? And you're not going to find that good fortune in company. It can be found, right where you are, on your own, doing what you enjoy. And there just may be a moment where everything makes sense, and you just stop struggling, you stop fighting, you stop arguing, and it's all clear, and you don't have to talk to anyone. It's just the way you feel, and you feel you're on the right track, and you're ready for new challenges. And those challenges might be represented by the fact that the moon is going to go into Leo pretty soon. And so there is this new moon coming up, and this new moon might, to begin with, feel as if it's your new moon, because you're going to have a time when the moon is in Leo and the sun is, when both the sun and the moon are in Leo. And this is the moment where it's starting to come together. And already sort of today we've got the sun and the moon making a 45-degree aspect. So you're starting to think that something needs to give before this lunar cycle comes to an end. And this lunar cycle ends in Virgo. I mean, that's the strange thing. But I mean, okay, it might seem obvious, but it just feels as if it's all about Leo, because the sun and the moon will be in Leo, will both be in Leo. It'll appear to be the case that the new moon is going to be in Leo, but then it's not. The new moon is in Virgo, and so perhaps you need to be ready for a sudden change of emphasis right at the end. And I know that's somewhat complicated. Maybe I'm not making myself clear, but I'll be able to talk about it more so a bit later in the week, maybe tomorrow, maybe Wednesday, when when the moon does move into Leo. Because when the moon moves into Leo, this does appear to be your moment, the last chance, perhaps, to take advantage of the sun being in Leo as well, because you've got this. You've got both the sun and the moon are about to be in Leo. So do take advantage of things, and perhaps as far as today is concerned, you are able to sort of review things, review where you're going, how you're going to go about it, and you can be lucky, and luck can be found close at home. If you look for luck elsewhere, then it might not be there, because you're carrying it. It's there. It's obvious. At least it will be obvious, once you find it. Virgo. There is a lot of activity socially, or at least there could be. A lot of people who are there. You can interact with them if you want, if you can be bothered. And with the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, it's a great aspect, by the way, moon conjunct Jupiter. So moon making this conjunction in a very sociable part of your chart, Cancer is sociable from a Virgo perspective, then that allows you to really take advantage of the various social opportunities around you, and try to get in touch with as many people as possible, because you can be the center of attention. And I know that Virgos sometimes aren't the center of attention, or they don't want to be the center of attention, but sometimes you can do it, and you can make your presence felt. And so that's something that really does look good. And the moon making a conjunction to Jupiter, though that moon conjunct Jupiter could well say something about you and other people and how you relate to them. In the Virgo chart, Jupiter is a planet that is connected to relationships, and so there could be meetings which allow you and someone else to find new ways of relating. Perhaps someone you didn't think you really got on with, but today you find connections and you find ways of relating which perhaps hadn't been obvious in the past. And also, Virgo, you shouldn't feel tied to anything. You shouldn't feel any great sense of obligation. You can do what you want, in whatever way you want. So if you want to express yourself freely, you can. And if you want to be independent, you can. So, just because there are a lot of people around doesn't mean to say that you have to give in to them or do what they say. That's not what it's about. It's about mutual respect. And you could, at the moment, be very inspired, and you see possibilities for freedom and for breaking free from something that has just been holding you back for a long time, and you're asking yourself, what's it all about? And it could be something that is in your head. It's not real. One thinks of that tarot card, the Devil, when you have this couple that are tied to the devil's plinth. So the devil is standing on some plinth, and this couple are in chains. But it's always pointed out, or it's often pointed out, that those chains are very weak, that you can escape the devil if you so wish. Well, it may not be the devil. Whatever it is you've tied yourself to, maybe it's just easier to tie yourself to something, because then you've got good reasons for doing nothing. But if you look at the chains that you have around your ankles and your wrists, and you feel constrained, it's in your head. And there is this idea that you're able to break free, and if you feel yourself to be in a prison, it's a prison of your own making. And once you are able to break free, and I think that today you can break free, then things are going to feel just a whole lot better. And there could also be a great sense of relief that finally you've done what you should have done you should have been doing ages ago, but now you're doing it, and you can see what is possible, and things are going to get better and better. And don't forget that less than a week, Virgo, we've got a new moon in your sign, and that new moon very much represents a new beginning. Libra, you're able to give as good as you get. You know how to look after yourself at the moment, and if something is important to you, Libra, then give it your best shot. Don't feel that you have to sort of stand back and let someone else take center stage. Absolutely not, Libra. It's a great time for you, and one reason it's a great time is because the moon is in Cancer, and with the moon in Cancer, this means that it's emphasizing the fact that Venus and Jupiter are in Cancer as well. So we've got Moon, Venus, Jupiter in Cancer. Cancer is a sign which is linked with success, with your success, not necessarily anyone else's success. And so, whatever it is that you feel you want to do, you want to push forward with, then you very much can. And, with the moon in Cancer, you're going to be aligned. You're going to be emotionally aligned. You'll be in the right place. You'll say the right things. And so, don't hold back. Don't be shy, and don't be self-conscious. I mean, you could be self-conscious. You could be thinking that you want to wait. You don't know what other people are going to say, but really, Libra, it can be an amazing day when you can accomplish a lot. And one aspect we do have is a square between the Moon and Mars. Now, Moon-Mars square, it can certainly be a problematic aspect, but for you, I don't think so. Mars is in Libra. Mars is in your sign, and so Mars in Libra is giving you, a huge amount of energy, and it might be exhausting at times having a high energy planet in Libra, but today the Moon makes that square, and so that square between Moon and Mars is really very motivating. It can really push you to the next level, and if you do hit any turbulence, if you hit any opposition, then that Moon square Mars is going to allow you to really assert yourself, and you shouldn't be ashamed of it. You can be assertive, and now might be a day for really demanding that you are taken seriously. So that means, Libra, if you're working, then have high ambitions for yourself. Do expect to be taken seriously. If you have ideas, make sure they are taken seriously. If you're not working, still you have things you're aiming for, and you can now give it your best shot, helped by that square between the Moon and Mars. And that Moon and Mars does mean that if there is any resistance, you know what to say. And if there is a real sort of competitive situation or a conflict situation where perhaps you and someone else are going after the same thing, then there's a way in which you can win through. Or perhaps you and someone else can both benefit from the same thing. It may not be a situation of your win is another person's loss. Perhaps everyone can benefit, but it's down to you to call the shots. This is not a time to be waiting for another person to take the initiative. No, it's down to you, and the more assertive you can be, the better. And you don't have to worry about being over assertive, because remember, the Moon is in Cancer. The Moon is applying to a conjunction of Jupiter. It's in a water sign. You're emotionally aware, and also Venus is in Cancer, so you have this emotional awareness to you, and you know what can be done. You know how far to go. You've got it all sorted out, and so Libra, you really can trust yourself. As far as relationships are concerned, well, the Moon is square Mars, and the Moon square Mars, it can be an irritated aspect, and some people might show irritation, even people you know really well, and the irritation might have nothing to do with you, but you have to know it's there. And once you know that someone is annoyed, then Libra, you're going to be quite good at sorting the problem out. Maybe you can say the right words. You can be quite soothing if you want to. So that is a manifestation of Moon square Mars. And also, don't forget that with Mars moving through Libra, you're the one that has the power. And even if you take Mars as being representative, well, not of you, but if we take Mars as being representative of someone else, then we get the image of someone else feeling that you have the power, and someone else moving onto your territory, not in an aggressive way. They're moving onto your territory, and because they're moving onto your territory, they have to follow your rules. So think about rules, and Libra is quite a rules-orientated sign. You think of Libra and the law courts and justice, and so whatever your rules are, your codes of conduct, you can expect other people to follow them, and I think they will. And this moon square Mars just does give you an opportunity to make it clear, what is acceptable, and you can make it clear without having to get involved in any big conflict. It's just a very sort of natural process. And when the moon's finished making the square to Mars, it makes that conjunction to Jupiter, and moon conjunct Jupiter, it's a great aspect, and that should help ensure that today everything really works for you. Scorpio, the headline aspect today is a square between the moon and Mars. Now, that does matter because Mars is your ruler, and perhaps the problem with this moon square Mars might be that you're not being sufficiently clear. Because if you're not being clear, then no one knows, do they? They don't know what you want. They don't know what your limits are. They just make assumptions. And if anyone makes assumptions, then moon square Mars might encourage you to get just annoyed. Scorpios hate it when other people make assumptions. And so you might be in the mood for sort of blaming people for assuming things that they can't possibly assume, that they had no right to assume. But the question is, Scorpio, are you making yourself clear? And that might be the problem. You might not be. You're expecting other people to guess, or perhaps to be telepathic, to know what you're thinking, and they can't possibly know what you're thinking. Or okay, they could, but you certainly can't assume it. And so that means, Scorpio, that today you need to be very open. You mustn't assume that people know. Just assume that everyone's ignorant, and tell them. It's okay if you repeat yourself. It's okay if you tell someone something they already know. That's not a problem. But what might be a problem would be if you just made assumptions, and someone does something and it doesn't make any sense to you, and you get annoyed, but you shouldn't get annoyed. So that's one aspect of today. Perhaps that's a negative aspect of the day, and there are some positive things going on. Well, we have a conjunction between the moon and Jupiter. Moon-Jupiter conjunction. It's a great aspect, and it's in Cancer. And it's in a Cancer. It's therefore in a Scorpio-friendly sign, and this moon conjunct Jupiter perhaps allows you to move above and beyond. You don't have to restrict yourself to any particular way of thinking or being, and if you want to take things to a different level, you certainly can. And you might also sort of get insights into what is important, what's important to you. And that does mean taking things further and being aware of the spiritual dimension, and thinking about what goes beyond yourself, and what goes beyond all the petty arguments that some people like to have. So that Moon-Jupiter conjunction can sort of take you above everything, and that's a place you need to be. And just remember that Scorpio has its three symbols, the scorpion, the snake, and the eagle, and they represent different expressions of the Scorpio energy. And being a Scorpio, you should always aspire to being the eagle. The eagle just rises above everything, unlike the scorpion and the snake. So you rise above everything, helped by that conjunction between the moon and Jupiter, and you're able then to get a perspective. And perspective is important, especially now. We are living in complicated times, and at the moment, Scorpios can, get a good idea of, what is happening in the world and how the world is changing. It's changing on a societal level, it's changing on a political level, it's changing on an economic level, and that is having a lot of influence. And Scorpio, you're aware of this, and perhaps you can take advantage of this awareness. If you understand the way the world is going, then you can position yourself correctly, and you might then come to the conclusion that you've got something unique to offer. And one aspect which we do have today, which I sort of haven't really mentioned, I should have mentioned it, it's a sort of a bit of an omission, and that is a trine between the Sun and Chiron. So the Sun is at 26-27 Leo, Chiron is at 27 Aries. They're making a trine, and as far as you're concerned, Leo, that Sun trine Chiron enables you to see things differently. Okay, that might particularly apply to your work, or if you have a business, or you're trying to be successful in some way. So that might be the primary way in which that Sun trine Chiron works, but it can work in a more general sense. It's about you being an individual. But if you want to do something special, something of lasting value, then that Sun trine Chiron is encouraging you to think outside the box. You don't have to do what is expected of you, and it just might all be about being sufficiently prepared. You're preparing for something, and you're preparing in a rather sort of unusual way, but you can see things that just other people can't see. And another thing you can see is you can see the way the world is going. And so if you want to take advantage of changing trends and be very different at the same time, then Scorpio, I think you really can. Sagittarius. I was just talking to Scorpio, and I mentioned to Scorpio that there is a trine between the Sun and Chiron, and Sun trine Chiron. This trine is exact, and I do think that it's going to have an influence on you, and probably quite a fortunate influence. So if you've got Sun trine Chiron, Sun in Leo trine Chiron in Aries, then the other far sign is Sagittarius. So this trine between Sun and Chiron does allow you to be a real individual. You can do something that is different, that might be unexpected and surprising, and it might not necessarily be what other people want to hear, what they want to see, but it's about you. And so don't be afraid, Sagittarius, to be an individual, to do something unexpected. And if you do cause a bit of surprise, even a bit of shock, that would indicate that you're on the right path. And at the same time, when we're talking about Chiron, we might be talking about healing and health, and also perhaps someone else's pain with Sun trine Chiron. And so maybe you have a chance, Sagittarius, to go out of your way to help someone if they're in pain, or if they're suffering, or not just pain and suffering. It could be just being underutilized. That has its own pain, and there may be a few people who are just, or one person who's just not utilizing what they've got. They're feeling sort of a bit lost and confused, and you can come in and help them out. So you can be a force for good. And matters are further improved by the fact that the moon is making a conjunction to Jupiter. Of course, Jupiter is your ruler, and this conjunction is taking place in Cancer, and this conjunction is really quite emotionally aware. And on an emotional level, by Sagittarian standards, you're pretty fine-tuned at the moment. And you do know what's going on, and you are also aware of what's been done wrong, and what is bad. A sense of right and wrong, and that is a feature of being a Sagittarius. Believe it or not, because Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter is a very moral planet, and so with the moon conjunct Jupiter, your moral compass is finely aligned. You want to do something, do things that are right, and that also links with the Sun trine Chiron. Sun trine Chiron definitely has a morality to it, and Sun trine Chiron is prepared to go out of its way if someone is being treated badly. Sun trine Chiron doesn't walk past. If another person is in pain, they want to intervene, and they can intervene with great intensity and also with anger if they're aware that other people are behaving badly. So today, Sagittarius, could be a very moral day where you have powerful feelings, and your ethics, your ethical code is going to be very fine-tuned at the moment. But aside from that, the moon is conjunct Jupiter, and the moon conjunct Jupiter is a very lucky aspect, and so you can create your own good luck through your actions and your intuitions and your feelings. You don't have to go out of your way to be lucky. It's all with you. It's all wound up with who you are emotionally. And so, Sagittarius, an intense day, and a day where you may have a number of obligations. An obligation to yourself, to make the most of who you are, but perhaps also an obligation to other people, particularly if those other people need help. Capricorn, don't be too defensive. There is a square between the moon and Mars today, and the moon is in Cancer. It's in your opposite sign. Mars is in Libra. It's got quite a high-profile sector of your chart. So when the moon is square Mars, there might be times today when you could be wary of other people, and you might perhaps regard them as being a threat, or maybe just an irritation, and that might have an impact on your behavior. So you could be standoffish, or you might have suspicions, but don't take this too far. It's something very passing, and the moon having made a square to Mars, it does make a conjunction to Jupiter, and tomorrow the moon will be making a conjunction to Venus. So don't rush to judgment when dealing with other people. They might do something that you don't think much of, but see how it develops. And it could be that when the moon makes a conjunction to Jupiter, you understand what it's all about. And moon conjunct Jupiter, it is a great aspect, and it perhaps allows you to benefit from other people. Moon conjunct Jupiter, also conjunct Venus, and so with these three planets in Cancer, is perhaps reminding you that you don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to be the one who is completely in control. Do see what other people have to offer, and they can in their own way be very generous, and you can be at the receiving end of another person's generosity, provided the atmosphere is right. And if you are too defensive, there is a possibility that you'll be missing out on a valuable opportunity, though you can't be too trusting. I mean, I sort of indicated yesterday that it's a time when Capricorns are aware of the complexity and the fluidity in our world, that things are not necessarily straightforward, and there are people who just don't know what's going on. Maybe most people don't really know what's going on, and we are living in a chaotic world, on a chaotic planet, where everything is in a state of flux, and that helps you sort of understand other people's behavior. So if other people are sometimes behaving in a way that seems strange, it's because they just don't know. And if people don't know, then what do you do? Well, you can talk about it, you can offer advice, but you can listen as well, because if other people don't know, then perhaps you don't know as well. So don't make assumptions about knowledge or relative knowledge, that thinking perhaps that you know better than another person. You don't know that. And it is very important that you give people a chance. And so with 3 planets in Cancer, Moon, Jupiter and Venus, I think that the various relationships in your life should be given a chance, and you have to see what people come up with. And perhaps it's important to present as little of your own material as possible. Just see what other people have got, because if you make too much of an effort to be dynamic, to tell everyone what you think, then that could spoil things. And so perhaps Capricorn, it's just a time, at least in the short term, to just observe and just see what's happening. And there may be moments in the day when things do come together. Maybe there'll be a point in the day where things come together, where suddenly you understand where it's all going, and you understand what people are trying to communicate. And having understood everything, there may be the moment of action when you feel that you can assert yourself, but you're not asserting yourself in a defensive way. That's not what it's about. You're doing it more in a summative way. You're summing up everything that you've seen, you've heard, you've listened to, and it's finally it's finally becoming clear, and you know what you have to do. But that is a possibility. It's not necessarily anything that is going to happen. It's just an option for you. Aquarius, you, as far as possible, should try to be sort of independent-minded. You shouldn't be of a view that everything relies on another person. That I don't think would work. Especially as some people are not on great form. It does seem, or might seem, that they're holding something back, or something that they just can't communicate. They would they'd like to communicate it. Perhaps they're looking for a way to communicate it, but it's just not coming together. And you need to just accept that. And this is especially the case on an emotional level. Now, it's true that there's a lot of emotion flying around today because we've got 3 planets in Cancer. But that doesn't mean to say that people are always going to be able to, express those emotions. And some things will be kept hidden. And I don't think it's you keeping things hidden. I think it's other people. And certain people may seem cold, or at least colder than usual. And again, it's just important that you don't take it to heart. You just regard that as being, just the way it is. You might ask why people are holding something back. It could be just plain uncertainty. They don't know what's going on. They perhaps feel that they're in the process of taking, some kind of a risk, and so it's just best, I think, to leave them be and focus on your own priorities. What matters to you, and what perhaps should matter to you at the moment, Aquarius, is making sure that at least on your end, everything is fine, that everything is worked out. It's all sorted out. And so if you are in a situation where you're bothered about something, you might be becoming aware that something has become chaotic, and because it's become chaotic, it's now attracting other things. I mean, you could say that, for example, if you've got, piles of garbage, I mean, I'm not saying there are piles of garbage, then, that could attract pests, rodents, all sorts of things. That could happen. And so what do? Well, you make sure the situation never arises in the first place. And so, it might be just a good idea to see the problem, see the way things could develop if they just carried on developing like they are, and just you do something about it. And you can do it, very effectively, helped by the fact that there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. And this Moon-Jupiter conjunction, because it's also tied up with Venus, because you've got Moon, Venus, Jupiter in Cancer, is really good as far as, your own health and well-being is concerned. You know what you like, where you feel balanced, and, balance, does matter. And, additionally, what irritates you. And so there could be an irritation at the beginning of the day. Something bothers you, something you don't like. It happens, and you might be upset about this, but you might then see it as a message. Something is telling you that things aren't in order, and now you can get them into order. So you can respond to an irritation very well, and your efforts to protect yourself and to look after yourself should really come together. And so your actions can be a real boost to your psychological and physical well-being. And finally, there is relationships. Well, I've already sort of mentioned right at the beginning of this piece that some people are not emotionally forthcoming, and that may say something about close relationships. So you should not have major expectations about any one person. They just may be holding something back, and so you just need to accept that. It's something temporary, but also don't forget that the Sun is now in late Leo, and the Sun in late Leo is it's strong, and the Sun is moving towards Regulus. So other people should not be underestimated. And if someone is holding something back, it doesn't seem to be emotionally fluent, there's probably a good reason for it, and they may be in a process of change, and things could become clearer in a day or two's time. Pisces. At the moment, Pisces, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter. And this conjunction between Moon and Jupiter, as I've been saying throughout this video, throughout my forecast of the 12 signs, it's a really fortunate event. And Moon is in its own sign, Jupiter is in a sign of its exaltation, Jupiter is your ruler, and so whatever you want to do today, then make sure you do it. Make sure you have a good time, and don't allow yourself to be thrown off course by temporary irritations. I mean, there could be a temporary irritation at the beginning of the day. So the beginning of the day might seem that there's something bothering you, but some things aren't going to work to plan. But it's just a passing irritation, and we could see that irritation as being the moon square Mars. So moon square Mars, there may be moments of concern, fear, worry, and anger, and you might feel that things are just stuck, but it's just moon square Mars. It doesn't last for very long, and the moon, having made the square to Mars, it makes a conjunction to Jupiter, and then tomorrow, Wednesday, you've got the moon making a conjunction to Venus. And so whatever you want to do, make sure that you do it, and don't apologize about it. And additionally, Pisces, be aware that right now you are not just quite forceful, but you're quite charismatic. You're able to come over as being an attractive person, also sort of warm and sensitive and good-humored. And so, your ability to make connections and get people to like you is really going to be very good. And you absolutely should not be self-conscious. If you've got something that you do well, then people need to know about it. Don't hide anything, within reason, because you are, in many respects today, the strongest of the 12 signs. There are things going on with all of the 12 signs. I think overall it's not a bad day, but you, Pisces, you seem to be in an especially strong position. And so, that means that if there's any rivalry or any conflict, through the right approach today, you can get the better of everyone. But it needn't be about conflict. It's just about you being yourself, and I don't think that there's anything that's going to stand in your way. And this does mean that as far as other people are concerned, you are attractive, and relationships should really fulfill your expectations, provided everything happens on your terms. It's that kind of day. It's not a day for doing what other people say, in terms of plans. Make sure that it's your ideas that are followed through. You don't have to abandon a plan because someone else wants to do something else, because in most cases your ideas are actually the best ideas. So if you're deciding what to do, whatever the situation, whether it's at work, whether it's socially, whatever it is, if you've got a conflict of ideas, you have your ideas, someone else has their ideas, I'm pretty sure that in most cases your ideas are going to be the ones that are going to work best. And so, Pisces, it's very important that you stand up for yourself, that you make it clear that you are in the right, that you've worked it through, and your spontaneous enthusiasm is going to really help. So don't overthink it, whatever it is. Don't allow yourself to be pushed into asking yourself your questions. So if you're in a situation where someone is asking you to justify your ideas, you don't have to justify your ideas, because you just know. And so Pisces, things do look really good for you. And so have a great Monday. Sorry, have a great Tuesday. Let's get that right. Anyway, those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to turn to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 17, following. I mean, it's a hexagram which is asking you to be reasonable, to accept that it's not all about you, and you have to sometimes observe what other people are doing and perhaps even sort of follow their lead, and that's okay. There's no humiliation there, and at the same time it's a two-way process. Sometimes you follow another person's lead, sometimes they follow your lead, and it doesn't really matter. It shouldn't be perceived as something about power, who has the power. That's not what it's about. It's about making the most of things and other people coming together and creating a favorable situation where just everything works, and there's no harm in being devoted to something. Perhaps we all need to be devoted to something. That is important. If we're not devoted to anything, then we're nothing. At least that's the message of the I Ching here, because we do have the fifth line moving, and if we show our loyalty and our devotion, it may not be to a person, it may be to an idea or to a principle, then we are going to be rewarded, and we're going to get loyalty back. So it is a time when our social situation can improve, and if if you're working today, then doing what you're told and showing devotion, loyalty to perhaps someone who is higher up in the hierarchy than you, there's absolutely no harm in doing that. And so it is about following, and if you find something, then it's likely that you will be rewarded for it. And so you don't have to think that it's all about you. And we do have a moving line, as I've just said. The fifth line moves, and so this hexagram, it moves to hexagram number 51, which is thunderbolts. So there may be a time today when something happens which you really weren't expecting. It was all going fine, and you were doing your bit, you were perhaps being loyal and faithful, you were doing a good job, and then something happens just out of the blue. And with thunderbolts, it's not a bad hexagram. It's just telling you not to panic, and instead you just accept that there is a change. It could be quite a big change, and none of your routines need to be impacted. Life can just go on as normal, provided you don't panic. So the day does appear to have a transition at some point, and one thing that can help you out, it goes back to that concept of devotion, of being loyal to something and being faithful to something. If you are devoted to the right thing, then it doesn't really matter what happens. It doesn't matter if there's a thunderstorm, if there are thunderbolts. It really doesn't matter, because you're doing the right thing and you can continue doing it. And one of the things about thunderbolts is what the I Ching says is that if you're offering incense, the sacrificial spoon, or the spoon holding the incense, you don't drop a single grain of incense. And why is that the case? It's because you have loyalty to something, you have devotion to something, and that devotion will see you through, and it doesn't really matter what happens in the outside world. And finally, I want to look at the square between the Moon and Mars. I mean, why am I focusing on the Moon-Mars square? Well, one reason is I didn't really want to talk about. I didn't want to talk about politics today. Sometimes I go too far in that. Is anyone really interested? I mean, I know there's a lot going on, and there's a fallout from Trump's meeting in Alaska with Putin, but let's put that all to one side and just keep it simple, and be aware that there is a square between the Moon and Mars. There's also a conjunction between the Moon and Jupiter, and I could have talked about that, but the Moon-Jupiter conjunction, I think I talked about that quite recently. So Moon square Mars seems to be, at the moment, to be sort of more appropriate. So here is the square between the Moon and Mars. And this Moon Mars square is exact. It doesn't appear to be exact on here because it says the Moon is at 7:48 and the Mars is at 7:47. But they are exact. This is a moment for when those planets become exact. And one reason why this square between the Moon and Mars might be important is because it links up with other things. Today we also have Moon conjunct Jupiter. So we've got a lot going on in cardinal signs, and so we've got of the traditional planets. We've got Moon, Mars. We've got five out of the 7 of the traditional planets are in cardinal signs. So there is a huge amount of cardinality going on at the moment. Now, I've gone on and on, over the last few years, talking about the 4 elements, but I haven't really talked about what are they called as the quadruplicities. I think they're sometimes called the qualities, and that's the elements of cardinal, fixed, and mutable. And the cardinal elements are about taking the initiative, and it's seen as a progression. So you take the initiative, you make something happen, then with the fixed elements, you then have to stabilize what you've done. So you've started something. Well, now what? Now what you're going to do? You have to stabilize it. And then the mutable elements. Okay, having stabilized it, it's all getting a bit boring. Now let's move on. What else? What are we going to do now? How are we going to spread it? So we start, we stabilize, and we spread. I mean, maybe that's one way of looking at cardinal, fixed, and mutable. I mean, I'm sure there are other ways. I haven't really given it a great deal of thought. And so with 5 cardinal planets, the general emphasis at the moment may be on how we start things and how we see the initiative and what kind of initiatives we are taking. And so with Mars, Moon square the Mars, square Mars, that part of that the cardinal aspect. Well, it is like a T-square. I mean, it's not exactly in a T-square, but you can say that Mars is sort of opposition Saturn. The Moon was making a square to Saturn. It's now making a square to Mars. It's moving on to a conjunction of Jupiter. So we are in the mood to start something. It's not about stabilizing things, and perhaps that says something about the world in which we're living at the moment. It perhaps is a time which favors the initiators. We're not going to be able to create stability. We have to start afresh. And so with Moon square Mars in particular, that perhaps represents the angry side to it. We do get angry with Moon square Mars, and if things aren't going our way. And Guido Bonatus talked about Moon and Mars. So Guido Bonatus, he was a monk who was I don't know. He was writing. I should know. In the Middle Ages, he did a series of aphorisms, which is widely regarded in the astrological community. And one thing he said about Moon Mars, I think he used the words, the woman is always right, I'll warrant. And so because he sees it, he saw the Moon as being a feminine planet, And so he would say, then have the logic, Moon aspecting Mars represents an angry woman, a woman who is very opinionated. And so his advice is here, the woman is always right, I'll warrant. So what he's saying is, of course, he's probably addressing a male audience in his aphorisms, that he's saying, and if a woman is has a particular opinion, it is in your best interest to just not argue with her. So that's one way in which one can look at Moon square Mars. And also with Moon square Mars, it is, it's not just angry, it can be violent, and Moon represents process. It's what is happening. You can't have a chart without the Moon. The Moon represents action. Without the Moon, everything is static, and so Moon square Mars it may show where things are going, where things are moving, and sometimes you need anger to move things to the next stage. So I'm just now going to just look at some events which had Moon square Mars, not people, but just events. And perhaps what I'm trying to suggest is that by looking at events, we might get an idea about what sort of things we might expect to happen in the world. Of course, these events are by and large, they're all negative. Well, most of them are negative. And so that is a reminder that it is probably an unfortunate aspect, all things being equal, Moon square Mars. And although Moon square Mars does happen very often, maybe this Moon square Mars is particularly important now because it's linked up with other aspects, because the Moon has just made a square to Saturn, it's making a conjunction, making a square to Mars, Moon is on the T, and also we've got the Moon, as it's making a conjunction to Jupiter, it's therefore going to be, I think, semi-square the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. So maybe it is worth looking at events which in the past have taken place at the time of the Moon square Mars. So one chart that I find it quite an interesting chart is the Challenger Collective. So what I mean by the Challenger Collective is you had the Challenger disaster in 1986, when the teacher went up on the space shuttle, and of course it was a disaster, and it blew up, and the whole crew were killed. And so with the Challenger Collective, what I've done is I took the dates of, I didn't know their times of birth, I took the dates of all of the astronauts on the Challenger, and then I just took the average. And so it's like a composite chart. Is it like a composite chart? It's not quite a composite chart. It's more like a time-space chart. I took the average date of their birth. So you can treat seven crew members. You can treat 7 birth dates as like numbers. Just find the average. And so if you find the average, they were born on average on May the 14th, 1946, and the Moon was at 7 degrees Scorpio. Now, I don't have exact times of birth. It may not have been exactly at 7 degrees Scorpio, but I think it would have been in early Scorpio. So that's not a great place for the Moon to be in. It's fallen, and it's making a square to Mars, and it's making a square to Pluto. And so you could just see Moon Mars square as just being an unfortunate event. Mars in Leo, quite a fiery event, and the Challenger Collective had a Mars-Pluto conjunction. This is probably not fortunate if you're planning on trying to go into space. And so this is an indication of how the Moon square Mars may not always be such a good thing. And so when you've got Moon square Mars, you can be quite impulsive, and you can get annoyed, and you don't like the way things are going. So you have to take action, and you're going to do it anyway. and you don't necessarily care how much criticism you're going to get. And this is what Richard Nixon did fairly early in his term of office when he ordered the bombing of Cambodia. And this was, I think, March of 1969, when he made the order. And it's sort of, I think, sort of him and Kissinger, and there are stories about perhaps him being at the time being drunk, but I think that's perhaps not the point. I think that whether he was drunk or not, he definitely would have given that order. And I believe there are issues that he circumvented Congress, and it was a very controversial decision. And so at the time of this order to bomb Cambodia, I don't know about the exact time, but it was sometimes around on March the 16th. I'd gone for noon, so I think it's reasonable to think that the moon was square Mars, and so moon in Pisces, square Mars, moon conjunct Mercury. So Mercury was square Mars, moon was picking up on that square, and so Mercury square Mars is being annoyed, hasty decisions, hasty thoughts, and it's Mercury in Pisces. It's not a great placement for Mercury. So moon square Mars with that moment where Nixon makes a decision to bomb Cambodia. And moon square Mars can also just be an awareness of a conflict. You see the conflict and you respond to what you see by what you say. Because don't forget, the moon is a communication planet. It can be a communication planet. So moon square Mars could be angry communication, or communication which is assuming that there is a conflict going on. And when Winston Churchill gave his Iron Curtain speech on March 5th, 1946, in which he basically said that there was an Iron Curtain across Europe, from Stettin to Trieste, but there was the Russian side of the Iron Curtain, the Soviet communist side, and then the Western side. This is the approximate time when he made the speech in Fulton, Missouri, and the moon was applying to us. Well, it had just finished making a square to Mars, but there was a Mars-Saturn conjunction, and the moon was making a square to that Mars-Saturn conjunction, and so that really informed his speech, and it wasn't just about his speech. It's the fact that his speech made an impression, and it's one of the most famous speeches of the 20th century, and you can see the anger there, and not just the anger, but it's also about separation, because Mars is a planet of separation. Venus is about perhaps joining things together, looking at how things are related to one another. Mars is a planet of splitting, and so I think that his Iron Curtain speech is reflecting that. And Mars can just be a planet of violence. It can be a planet of sort of execution. And Louis the 16th was executed. The King of France was executed on January 21st, 1793, and the moon was exactly square Mars, and the moon was also opposition Jupiter. So there was a T square here, moon, Jupiter. You could say moon opposition Jupiter, the people, the mob, the people watching the event, and Jupiter on the 8th house cusp. So I think that that Moon Mars square, Moon in Taurus, of course, that certainly makes sense, because he was decapitated. You would associate decapitation with Taurus. It's not on Algol, by the way. It looks as if it might be close to Algol, but you have to remember, because of precession, I would guess that the moon would be 5 degrees away from Algol. So I wouldn't regard that moon as being on Algol, but Taurus and the neck, there's an association there. So Mars, and you could say Mars in Aquarius sort of represents this fairly modern form of execution. and it is Aquarius. That reminds us that Aquarius is quite a totalitarian sign, but it's it's the year zero concept with Mars in Aquarius. Like with the French Revolution changing the calendar, or you could see Pol Pot as year zero as being quite an Aquarius thing. So that seems to fit. And continuing on a French theme, there is the Rainbow Warrior, which is a chart that I've looked at quite a few times before. And Moon square Mars is about anger, as I've said on several occasions. Anger that something is getting in your way. So France wants to be able to conduct nuclear tests in the South Pacific in the mid-1980s, and the Greenpeace and their Rainbow Warrior are trying to mess it up. They're trying to send a Rainbow Warrior into the blast zone, or into the exclusion zone, and this is upsetting the French. It's messing with their tests. So what do you do with Moon square Mars? Well, you make sure you eradicate the problem. And so when the Rainbow Warrior blew up, the French, they sent agents to New Zealand to blow it up, but they succeeded. A photographer got killed, and there you have Moon square Mars. You also have Sun conjunct Mars. So when you're thinking about Moon square Mars and whether or not it's going to represent major issues, major things going on, you perhaps have to look at other planets that are also tied up with this with the square. So here you've got Sun conjunct Mars, a very sort of fiery conjunction, but it's in Cancer, and of course that perhaps indicates that it's a boat. And then Moon, because Cancer is a water sign, and Moon is making the square to the Moon, to Sun and Mars. And interesting that Neptune is quite close to the midheaven. Now, if you've got Moon square Mars, you probably should avoid doing anything too dangerous, because it might go wrong. If you're doing something really dangerous, I mean, an example might be Bill Burroughs when he decided to do the William Tell routine with his wife Joan Volmer in Mexico City. He tried to shoot a glass off her head, but he missed and killed her. So that happened. Here's Joan Volmer's chart. No, not her chart. This is a chart of her. That's not. I don't want to look at Joan Volmer's chart. I want to look at the chart of her death. So this was Bill Burroughs' wife or partner, and this is when she died. So the Moon was making a square to Mars. So it's important not to. Well, it's a good idea not to shoot people's glasses off people's heads anyway, but to do it when Moon is square Mars, that is asking for trouble. And likewise, if you are a racing driver, you want to be very wary of Moon square Mars. And we think of the San Marino Grand Prix, where two drivers were killed, Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger. So here's this: Roland Ratzenberger was killed during the San Marino Grand Prix. And Roland Ratzenberger had a Moon-Mars opposition in his own chart, probably. I mean, I don't have a time of birth for Roland Ratzenberger, but he had Moon in Scorpio and Mars in Taurus. I don't know how close it is. At noon it was very close, but there's certainly a Moon-Mars element to Roland Ratzenberger, and he died on April the 30th, 1994, at the San Marino Grand Prix. And well, I think he died in hospital in Bologna, but so there's the Moon, it's square Mars, and so that just gives us an idea about what Moon square Mars is about. So looking at these examples, you really don't want to do anything dangerous with Moon square Mars, and there might be, you think about sort of terrorist actions or the dangerous stuff like sending up the Challenger when the Challenger collective, when the time-space chart for the 7 people on the Challenger had a Moon square Mars. Well, probably you shouldn't have had that particular group of people going going up into space. He should have changed the chart by swapping some people out so that the collective chart no longer had the moon square Mars. So anyway, those are some thoughts on moon square Mars. I hope you found that of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.